have 39 participants pre-live. All right. Okay. Hello and welcome to Facts First PH's research briefing today, our 10th. I'm your host today, Jello Gonzalez, and we are live now on the Facebook pages of Rappler, Move PH, Newsbreak, as well as on the pages of several other partners of Facts First PH. What is Facts First PH? It's a coalition of more than 100 media and civil society groups coming together and taking a stand to protect the facts and move towards a healthier and safer public space online, especially now with the elections just a few days away. So the coalition is composed of several operational layers all working towards that goal. And this weekly research briefing is part of the research layer, wherein research groups conduct an analysis of the data generated through this effort to gain insights on narratives and networks aimed at manipulating the public ahead of the polls. We have two studies today. So one takes a look at the history of the prevalence of fake news, disinformation, or online propaganda in the 2016 and 2019 elections, with the latter supported by fact-checking data from Rappler. The study is called Fake News, Internet Propaganda in Philippine Elections, Episode 1, 2016 to 2019. And this will be presented by its author, Gerardo V. Eusebio. So Professor Eusebio has had extensive experience in public service, consultancy work, and the academia. He has served in both the legislative and executive branches of government. He was congressional district head of Pasay, special assistant to the late Senator Tolentino, and chief political officer under former Senator Honasan. In 2008, he was appointed by then President Arroyo as director of the social marketing service of the DSWD. The Asia Foundation also hired him as an independent consultant from 2015 to 2018 to facilitate the implementation of the SHS program in Manila. So currently, Professor Eusebio is head of political marketing at Warwick and Roger and board director of Lilac Center for Public Interest. He taught political science, development, and history intermittently on a part-time basis at various universities such as UST and the DLSU since 1992. He has written papers on youth development, police community relations, educational reforms, and electoral campaign politics. So we will be having a Q&A right after the presentation. So please type in your questions in our Q&A box, or if you're watching on Facebook, in our comments section. Okay, so Professor Jerry, please take the stage.
Thank you, Jello, for that very kind introduction. Good day, everyone. This is just part one of a two-part paper on fake news and internet propaganda in elections. Today's presentation will cover the elections in 2016 and 2019. Next. The 2016 Philippine general elections is said to be a watershed moment for social media and elections in the Philippines. The increased availability of social media led to its effective use by then Mayor Rodrigo Duterte in his campaign for the presidency. His campaign highlighted how social media can be used in Philippine elections and all of the issues that it entails. One of the more significant issues is the appearance and rise of internet trolls, fake news, and internet-based propaganda in Philippine elections. Later on, they will become buzzwords. Now, this continued all the way to the 2019 legislative and local elections, having proven its potency in social media. Next. But how Filipino elections come to this? We would explore the history of fake news and internet propaganda in the 2016 and 2019 Philippine elections, and how did it start? How prevalent fake news was way back then, and what were the most recurring themes? And how did this affect Philippine politics? Next. The Philippines is currently considered the social media capital of the world by the amount of use, where 80 million individuals use social media on average about 4 hours a day. Facebook is the predominant platform in the country. accounting for nearly 93% of the country's social media market share as of 2020. This is the result of the Philippine telecommunications companies such as Smart Mobile availing the free basics service from Facebook in 2015, a service where data usage is made free to users through bundled prepaid and postpaid promos to the telecom companies. Next. But social media and information technology has been with Filipinos, or has been a practice or regular practice in the Philippines much, much earlier, especially in their social and political lives. If you remember, or some of you were too young then, the text blasts that were the leading method in organizing the EDSA DOS, for instance. It is through social media where survivors of Typhoon Yolanda not only indicated their survival to their family and friends, but tried to get over their experiences. Of course, some would opine that text blast is not necessarily social media. That's true, but it actually originated from there. It has some sort of evolved into its form today. For instance, if you recall the Million People March during the PDAF brouhaha in the past, where in August 13, there was this so-called Million People March in Luneta. That was actually the operation of social media. Next. In 2016, or in the 2016 national elections, Duterte's campaign took advantage of social media, going so far as to get assistance from Facebook in optimizing their social media presence. Of course, not only the campaign of former Mayor Duterte, but actually other politicians also availed of the same. They also utilized online volunteers and internet trolls to bolster support to the candidates, and for instance, Duterte and his slate. And some say harass the opposition. Much of the reason for Duterte's heavy reliance on social media in 2016 is practical. His campaign team didn't have the resources that the major political parties had, thereby maximizing the relatively minute 10 million peso media campaign budget through creative means. This was reported by the social media director of the campaign team of Duterte during that time. Next. Of course, there have been countermeasures since then. For instance, Rappler has established the fact check section where articles are published to rate the falsity of claims made in the internet, not just political ones. Facebook is also doing its part, an example being their efforts to take down Philippine-based pages and accounts that spread false news on the site. Next. As a rudimentary measure of the prevalence of and major themes in fake news during and around the 2019 elections, we looked at Rappler's fact-check articles published between October 2018 and May 2019. The selected time period covers the months from the filing of candidacy to the actual 2019 elections. To measure prevalence, interactions were the sum of available lives. Reactions, shares, retweets, views, and comments in each claim or article were used. For prevailing themes, keywords were considered or are considered. Note that would be recorded. What would be recorded would be actually the data from the time of the publication of the Rappler articles. Next. Checking first on some preliminary statistics, we find 135 articles tackling specific claims. Of these, 73 are rated as false, 40 were hoaxes, and 19 were misleading claims. Facebook is by far the biggest source of recorded interactions, with 104 claims being posted. The articles have recorded a combined total of 4.36 million interactions from the claims, assuming that these interactions are divided equally to likes, reactions, shares, retweets, and comments, and are done by the same people. There could be as much as 1.45 million people that have viewed fake news. Next. Moving now to the major themes of typology of these articles, we find that political claims from the vast majority of claims studied and rated during the selected time period with 82 instances. It also has the most number of recorded interactions, with close to 2 million interactions recorded. This may not be surprising at all, since much of these articles, and even the claims themselves, have arisen, or in some cases resurfaced from the then upcoming 2019 elections. Next. Next. Looking at the specific themes or topics, the 2019 elections as a source of claims can be argued as both direct and indirect. Directly, the 2019 elections contributed to a good number of claims, at 10. Indirectly, the 2019 elections was supported with other topics. For example, we have President Rodrigo Duterte as the top topic in the claims. There were also the claims on Ocho Derecho. The Liberal Party senatorial slate for 2019 are also present. So these were the fake news in 2019. Next slide. To say that the 2019 elections is the major source for the rise of all the 135 claims attested by Rappler is a stretch, however. Looking at the top 5 claims by the number of interactions garnered, the selection is mixed, with a misleading claim regarding processing costs for land titles being the top overall article. Next. Zooming into the political claims, and it is still a bit mixed. Only one article of the top 5, that of supposed voter fraud by appreciated ballots, directly mentions the 2019 elections. The top story was about the supposed lack of evidence on former President Ferdinand and former First Lady Imelda Marcos' graft and corruption. In the middle 3, meanwhile, I think I made a mistake. I was going too fast. This is actually complementary to the slide before. Anyway, the middle 3. Meanwhile, can we go back? There, sorry. Again, if you will view it carefully, only one article of the top 5. These were the top 5 claims that with most interactions recorded. That of supposed voter fraud by appreciated ballot. So that was a top story. Directly mentions mentions the 2019 elections. So the top story was about the supposed lack of evidence on former president and former First Lady Imelda Marcos's graft and corruption case. So the middle 3, however, were focused on the achievements, both real and imaginary or supposed, by President Duterte. It was not totally political. Anyway, that was just what was collected during this year, or during this report. Next, please. Nonetheless, fake news and internet propaganda seem to be effective. A strong social media presence can help candidates boost their electoral performance, especially if said candidates have multiple supporter pages helping them spread any and all of their messages and statements, including memes, viral content, and fake news. So everyone and every candidate that was sort of thought to be worth their salt availed of social media. Everyone from every color of the political spectrum, opposition and administration, both availed of social media. For example, out of 18 candidates for senator running in the 2019 elections, all but three, so that's a lot. So 15 out of 18 senatorial candidates, the top most senatorial candidates, all had their official Facebook pages. So all availed of social media. Next. The 2016 and 2019 Philippine elections gave us a look at how widespread fake news and internet propaganda is, and how much this could affect elections. Even in this cursory look, the fact that more than 1 million people can be argued to have been exposed to fake news just based on recorded interactions alone is quite telling. A more complete data, which include followers and page views, might paint a better yet different picture. But this can already be indicative of a virtual political environment that is vulnerable to malicious and deleterious propaganda. Everyone, therefore, should be vigilant, especially that another local and national elections is forthcoming. One now wonders, however, how far fake news and internet propaganda has taken its hold in these upcoming elections. We shall see soon enough. Next, please. And this ends my presentation. I would like to thank Rappler and my fellow panelists here for and all of you for being an audience or great audience to us. Good day. Now I also prepared Jello a short findings. No? I don't know if I'll have a time I'll time to enunciate this. Siguro mga ano lang to, mga 2 minutes or 3.
All right. Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Now going back to the first half of the paper, I would like to just enunciate the following highlights. One, the study objectives that explore the history of fake news and internet propaganda in 2019 elections. So that was all. But then the Philippines is currently considered the social media capital of the world. So that we already mentioned that. And then finally, let me just say that the political claims dominate the shares of claims by major type. And fake news and misinformation has been effective for those favored candidates with strong social media presence. So thank you. Thank you, Jello.
Okay, so we'll proceed to a short Q&A. Please send in your questions in our Q&A box in our comment section. But we'll start with our own question. How do you think the 2022 version of the elections are faring in terms of the spread of disinformation, fake news, as compared to what you've seen and studied in the 2016 and 2019 elections?
Well, certainly it has expanded. It has broadened its coverage and as well as its viciousness. No, it has been very toxic, as they say. No, it's not actually an over exaggeration. So largely, Jello, it has it has stayed there. It's still very present, although there are now fact checkers and as well as there are legal cyberspace laws that are in place. But apparently, it has certainly not been very effective in curtailing.
So not enough. There's still a lot to do.
Not enough. Okay. Still a lot to do.
Do you think people are generally more aware of these disinformation campaigns now compared to 2019?
Okay. I believe so. I believe so because now, while the buzzwords fake news and disinformation, misinformation abounds, equally becoming relevant are phrases like fact checking and other similar words that are now quite popular. Meaning to say, people are now also aware of the negatives of social media campaigning. I'd say campaigning because today it's actually unlike before that it was just a segment of what was aired out as we found out. Remember the 5 top news during that time. Today it's actually probably the top 5. If we would have a similar tabling of results, probably all of them would be maybe more than 50% would be political in nature.
So there's an overwhelming number of false fake news that are really political in nature, as you've seen in studies. So that's evidence that it's really being used for political goals. Would you say?
That's true. The problem, Jello, is because of its prevalence, it's all around. People are now getting confused. That's the problem, confusion. It's for me, it's the worst thing that could happen, really, because we are all attached to social media, and yet we cannot do anything about. We're not sure of social media. It's like having a newspaper, and all of these newspapers are spreading lies. Sometimes you really don't know. It's very difficult, really. So you have to discern before you just read it. Now you have to read and discern. So it's a two-step process. You read first, and then you think, is this the truth? Am I reading an accurate article? You have to check it. You have to check.
What are your general tips for determining
Well,
this is something that you could be
that's true,
there seems to
Jello,
be a
but
deficit?
that's a very good question, but a very difficult one as well. No? Because how can I give advice when where me myself would not distinguish? No, probably it's well, as they say, go to the basics. Saan ba nanggaling yan? Tignan nga natin kung more or less. Maybe you can fact check it with Rappler, or fact check it with Google, or fact check it with I don't know how, but so you would have to need a certain level of discernment.
Yes, and some level of I think
Yes.
we have to media literacy and educate people on
Exactly.
just how to determine
Exactly.
these things. But if let's look a little further back, even before, because you went as further back as the time of text messaging
Yes.
to gather support for EDSA DOS. But
Yes.
even much further back, were there already disinformation campaigns before all these technologies came into play, even before text messaging,
Yes.
fake news, but it
Again,
wasn't spreading as fast.
a very insightful question again, Jello, and comment. That's very true. Actually, history is maybe, I think, even in the I don't know, maybe in Europe, even in the medieval times, there were also some sort of a disinformation campaign too. But of course, certainly we all know that it was probably just shallow and not that. But certainly, if you recall, if you recall, during the time when there was, I don't know if you were already born yet at that time, Jello, when there was no internet yet, no?
Yes.
There
How
were
were the
already,
campaigns back then? How were
abutan
the
na ba yun?
information?
Yung mga panahon na yun, meron pa rin, may mga
90s.
black propaganda sinasabi. If you
Mhm.
recall. They call it black propaganda. Yun yung parang
Mhm.
fake news. Black propaganda, meron mga tinatawag na mga disinformation na rin, pero they're spreading parang chismis yun actually, sinasabi ng Marites ngayon, no? It's actually the good old chismis before, no? Black propaganda. They sow false information, and then this information would try to hurt a candidate, or they would spread half lies, half truths. No? And of course, then gasgas na Goebbels ng Germany, di ba, the Minister of Propaganda ni Hitler was very famous in that category. Remember when he said, "A lie multiplied 1,000 times becomes the truth," and everybody became a Goebbels. And some people are actually excited to become one, especially with the lure of the CIA kind of folklore, and even folklore of lore. Yeah, so parang exciting, James Bond type. So these things actually occur. And me myself, as a campaign operative, likewise, since 1995, I've been engaged as political consultant to many campaigns. So yung Marojas campaign of 2004, Gringo Honasan campaign of 2000. So meron na kami mga experiences. Of course, we did not employ it, but we have what we call special operations group. Mm-hmm. This group of ours try to discern these things. Yung mga ganyan, we try to block it off right away by issuing statements, etc. During that time, it was in the form of newspaper articles, columns, and fake news na rin talaga, yung mga inalabas ng mga and then we try to question it, etc. So the battle was in what we call the air war. It is the media composed of yung tri-media na sinasabi nung araw. No? You had the powerful television, radio, and broadsheets, as well as tabloids, which is actually more powerful broadsheets. And then it now evolved to social media. Nagkaroon ng transformation with a powerful, yes.
That's where the problem came in, that
Yun ang
information
talaga,
just flew too
yes.
fast and almost, yun nga, sabi nyo kanina, confusion, di ba?
That's right.
It's
Yes.
so much easier to multiply a lie 1,000 times now than it was before. Okay, we have two questions from our attendees. Do you think, sir, our attitude and culture also has a large role to play on why fake news have been rampant? If yes, how will we break this mindset, especially among Filipino households?
I don't know how to measure our penchant for seemingly penchant for chismis. Ayoko sabihin na tayo bayan ng chismoso. Pero parang meron tayong konting hilig din, di ba? I mean, just like any culture, I suppose, some are also enamored by stories, etc., storytelling and all that. And so, yes, I believe that we are sort of probably more prone to bite, to kinakagat natin agad yung mga fake news. Tapos and then we realize baka hindi naman totoo, and then we try to find out what. But probably, I don't know. Wala naman scientific dito, Jello. No? Wala naman scientific. But it's a very good field of study, to find out how attracted are Filipinos to these to fake news and all these social media nuances.
That would be a good topic for maybe a second batch of facts first studies.
I believe so. My part two would be
factor.
Yes.
Okay, so we have time for one last question. This is from Georgeline Jaka. It's about satire. So satire is often also dagdag pa to sa information ecosystem natin.
Kilala ko si Georgeline Jaka, kasama mo. Oh, yes.
So it's often confused with false.
Hi, George.
Any comments, reaction on
yes.
satire?
Yes.
You find this complicated challenge on fighting misinformation?
Actually, a lot of satire is happening in social media.
Mm-hmm.
Satire can be sometimes humorous, sometimes, but it really is a what we call that, a fodder for the mind, sabi nga, satire. No? But certainly, it just like memes, di ba? Napansin mo, Jello, yung mga memes na tinatawag, most of them are really satirical. And some actually narratives are actually satirical. Yes, I believe it that a lot of satire is being played out in social media.
Okay.
Did I answer that question?
Okay.
Thank you, Jello.
Okay, thank you, Professor Jerry. I wish we had more time for this discussion, but we have another study coming in.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thank you also. All right, so we have our second study. Hang on. Just get to my notes. On to our second study. So in the last decade, social media platforms have increasingly become a part of many online campaigns, whether it be for brands or social movements. This 2022 Philippine national and local elections, let's look at how Twitter and Facebook have become the main avenue where candidates try to interact, convince, my notes, and rally with an electorate that is becoming hyper-engaged in online communities. So the title of the work is #Wars, Opposing Trends on Twitter Show Online Coordination Strategies Between Marcos and Robredo Supporters. So we have Professor Brian Paul V. Samson. He's an associate professor of computer science and informatics and currently the chair of the Department of Software Technology in the College of Computer Studies at the De La Salle University. He directs the Center for Complexity and Emerging Technologies and concurrently serves as the Deputy Director of the Dr. Andrew L. Tan Data Science Institute. His research focuses on the integration of human-computer interaction and complex systems research in developing civic media and technologies that promote pro-social behavior. So we'll have a Q&A again after this presentation by Professor Brian. Professor, please.
Thank you, Jello. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. So again, the title of my talk for today is called #Wars, but in reality, it's not so much of a war. I guess this is an exaggeration to pass as a headline. But anyway, ayun, what happened? All right. So the focus of the study that we did at the Data Science Institute at DLSU is on online campaigns on Twitter. Okay, so online campaigns are nothing new. Okay, in Twitter, Facebook, all of these digital platforms. So in some cases, online campaigns are used by social communities to establish or find like-minded people. Protesters also use social media or digital platforms such as Twitter and Facebook to engage other protesters or find other protesters in online movements. So like the Black Lives Matter in the US. And then, of course, brands also use Twitter and Facebook and all these digital platforms for brand discovery and marketing. Okay. And specifically for the elections that we're having this year, okay, online campaigns are used to engage a supporter base, especially for the two large camps of Robredo and Marcos. Okay. It's also being used to convince undecided voters. Okay, so for those who are not yet sure who to vote for, online campaigns are being done to share achievements, platforms of these candidates. And then lastly, which I will show also later, electoral campaigns also use hashtags on Twitter to coordinate among volunteers, which is also not something new, okay, for many of us in the Philippines. Okay. So yon. So it's a battle of hashtags and taglines. Okay. So the coverage of our study is from October 1st of 2021, which is the start of the filing of candidacy. Okay, and until April 27 of 2022, 5 p.m., which is around 11 days before the end of the campaign period. Okay, so we use Twitter API, okay, specifically the historical archive, and we were able to collect 1,203,204 tweets, quote retweets, and replies. So if you are familiar with the Twitter ecosystem, tweets are the actual posts. Quote retweets are like they are appending additional text to the original tweet, and then replies are replies to original posts. Okay, that contain target hashtags that I will be showing later on. And just a little note for everyone: since we are using since we queried from the historical archive, it will not include deleted tweets. So it is possible that from October 1, 2021 to April 27, 2022, there were some tweets that were deleted over time for various reasons. Okay. The historical archive doesn't also include tweets from suspended or private accounts. Okay, so if some accounts were spammy or were reported, so they could have been suspended. Okay, so their tweets are either withheld or not returned to us in the API. Okay, and then lastly, the number of tweets that are included in the study are likely to be lower than the actual number of tweets posted during that period, because we did not really monitor the posts as they were entered into the platform in real time. All right. So focusing on the most engaged camps on Twitter, the Lenny Kiko and BBM Sara camps. Okay, so we use hashtags. So they basically use hashtags to mobilize and energize their supporters to trend their campaign sorties, to trend or share future volunteer events, for information drive, and of course for election campaigns. Okay, so our analysis focuses on the competing or countering hashtags that emerge during the campaign period, such as the following. So this is just a sample. So for example, the original hashtag kay Lenny tayo against the countering hashtag or competing hashtag kay Lenny talo and kay Lenny patay tayo. And then as a response to the countering hashtag by the other camp, kay Lenny talo, the Lenny Kiko camp also came up with a countering hashtag, which is kay Lenny talo si Marcos. And then another example of a countering or a pair of countering hashtags are let Lenny lead and on the other camp, let Lenny leave. So we will go into the details of those pairs of hashtags later on. Okay. Aside from these pairs of countering hashtags, we also collected posts from tweets that use the following Lenny Kiko related and BBM Sara related hashtags. So examples are Kakampink, Laban Lenny Kiko 2022, Angat Buhay Lahat. And then on the other side, you have BBM Sara Unity Team, Agaw Buhay Lahat, and then Len Len Loser. Then you can just read the other hashtags because I'm not sure whether we are allowed to say some of the words there. Yeah. So as I mentioned earlier, when we did the when we queried the historical archive, we got around 1 million tweets. And then out of those 1 million tweets, we were able to extract 72,202 unique and valid hashtags. So aside from the hashtags that I showed earlier, okay, marami pa kami nakuhang iba because some posts use multiple hashtags. So we are also interested, ano pa ba yung ibang ginagamit nila in conjunction with those popular ones. And then in order to analyze and visualize the whole hashtag landscape on Twitter during the election campaign period, we wanted to come up with a network. Okay, we wanted to represent it as a network. So we processed, or we came up with a co-occurrence network of hashtags. So how many times did these two hashtags appear in the same tweet? Okay, so and that process yielded 568,015 unique hashtag pairings. So those are the edges. Those are the edges that you see here on the network, and then the circles that you see are the actual hashtags that were used. Okay, so if two circles or if two nodes are connected, it means that they were used at least once, okay, in a tweet. And then if you notice, there are also assigned colors. So the pink circles or the pink nodes are the Lenny hashtags, and then the red nodes are the BBM Sara hashtags, and then the blue ones are neutral hashtags, meaning they're not really related or attached to any of the two camps. So examples of the neutral ones are, for example, No to Fake News, Our Vote, Our Future, Halalan 2022, Election 2022, and then hashtags related to certain debates. Okay. So at least visually, you can see the distribution of Lenny Kiko related hashtags and BBM Sara related hashtags. Okay. And then of course in this because we had 72,000 hashtags, we were not really interested in looking at each of them. So we filtered the number of hashtags further by looking at the hashtags that had at least karang 1,000 posts that used them. So doon lang kami nag-focus, and that led us to around 276 hashtags na ginamit at least 1,000 times. Okay? So we can say, ang assumption namin dito is pag more than 1,000 times nagamit yung isang hashtag, it means na medyo popular yung hashtag na yun. Okay? Or at least nag-trend siya. So just to characterize the different ways that the two camps tried to use the hashtags. Okay, so for the Lenny Kiko tweets, they comprise 87.68% of the Twitter posts. Okay, so marami talaga dun sa tweets na nakuha namin from the Twitter API ay galing sa mga Lenny Kiko supporters. Okay, which is quite expected because we know that Lenny Kiko supporters are active on Twitter. Okay, parang doon na sila nabubuhay. Okay. And then if we look at the top 5 hashtags that are being used by their camp, so the top is Lenny Kiko 2022, which is around 40.28% of the tweets. Okay, and then Kulay Rosa Sambukas, Lenny Kiko All the Way, Let Lenny Lead, and Angat Buhay Lahat. Okay? Yeah. So yung Let Lenny Kiko 2022, siya yung pinakamalaking circle dun sa network. Okay. So looking at the actual content of the tweets that actually used these hashtags, okay, what we notice is that Lenny Kiko supporters use these hashtags to highlight achievements, okay, of their candidates and their platforms. It was also used to collate personal stories. So we know that there are many beneficiaries of the candidates. So they use the hashtags to actually collect, okay, the stories of people who received help, okay, or were beneficiaries of programs of the Lenny Kiko tandem, okay. And then they were also used to share and consolidate volunteer initiatives. So marami yan on the Lenny Kiko side. And then particularly yung Kakamping Wednesdays, it was regularly used during the campaign period, during Wednesdays, as a show of force, okay, on Twitter. So ginagamit yun ng mga supporters to show that yes, we are campaigning for this candidate, okay, and we are wearing pink on this day. Okay. Of course, not everything is positive on the Lenny Kiko side. They also have hashtags that are used to show strong opposition to the other candidates. So an example of that is Marcos Duwag, no to Marcos Duterte 2022. So it's a direct opposition to the other party. Okay. However, okay, compared to the other hashtags and other contents that are being posted by their camp, these negative posts only comprise around 4% of the Lenny Kiko related hashtags. So konti lang sila compared to the rest of the hashtags that we were able to extract. And then of course, because the Lenny Kiko camp has a lot of volunteer initiatives, may mga people's rally, event-specific hashtags like Cavite is Pink and Pasig Laban were also used by the Lenny Kiko camp to hype interest and encourage more supporters to attend. Okay, so the usual trend is days before the actual event, nagsisimula ng gumamit ng hashtag yung mga Lenny Kiko supporters. And then of course, it peaks a day before and on the day itself. And then the engagement is sustained around 2 days after the event. Okay, but for bigger events like the NCR South Grand La Rally, which is the biggest that we've had so far, these event-specific hashtags were also used by volunteers to call for immediate support, like additional manpower and supplies. So like what is being shown here on the screen, so may isang tweet from a volunteer is already on site and they needed manpower help. They also needed parang gunting, yung mga ganyan, other materials that can be used to prepare yung event for the following day. Okay. So what we noticed doon sa Lenny Kiko tweets is that especially doon sa mga event-specific hashtags, there's this level of coordination which is somehow similar to how pop group fandoms rally for their idols on online charts and how Filipinos, yung mga groups sa Philippines, respond to disasters in real time. It's very similar to that. So ginagamit nila yung hashtag to get more volunteers, to get more help, and then share information for a particular event. Ganon. And then of course, during the event itself, it's also used for ad hoc coordination. Okay, so kunwari may nagre-request ng tubig, where exactly yung mga ganong klase na coordination. So that's what we noticed sa Lenny Kiko tweets. And then going to the other camp, okay, on the other hand, sa BBM Sara naman, okay, the top hashtags are yung BBM Sara Uniting, which is 1.8% of the hashtags, or sorry, the posts that we were able to collect. Lenny Tanga sa lahat, and then kay Lenny Talo. Okay, compared to the Lenny Kiko tweets, the BBM Sara tweets were only 6.16% of the Twitter posts. Okay, so one possible reason to explain this is we've heard of news like weeks before na Twitter actually removed some accounts, and most of the accounts that were removed were from the BBM Sara account. Okay, so it is possible that majority of the tweets that were supposedly here included in the analysis were removed as part of that action by Twitter. Okay. Yeah, and then just to describe how, or to characterize how the BBM Sara camp were using their hashtags. So similar to the Lenny Kiko camp, they were using it to highlight the achievements of their candidates, okay, the plans that they were sharing, during the campaign trail, and some sound bites from interviews, forums that their candidates were attending. And then, okay, similar again to the other camp, it also shows strong opposition, okay, especially for Lenny Robredo. Okay. And then since we talked about, and then another interesting observation that we had when we collected the historical archive is that there were around only 17 hashtags that is related to the BBM Sara camp out of the 276. Okay. And then 10 out of 17 of those hashtags are actually aimed to show strong opposition towards the other candidate. Example of that is Lenny Tanga sa Lahat and Lenlen Loser. Okay, other top hashtags include BBM Sara 2022, kay Lenny Patay Tayo, BBM is my president 2022, Lenny Lugaw, Lenny Duwag, and then BBM para sa lahat. Okay. And then since we mentioned their use of hashtags during their campaign sorties, one interesting observation that we had sa mga BBM Sara tweets and supporters is that they were also using the same parang format as the Lenny Kiko camp. So kung sa Lenny Kiko, like Cebu is pink, NCR is pink. For the BBM Sara camp, it's pula ang Cebu, pula ang Taguig. Okay, so it's the Tagalog version of the hashtags that the other camp is using. But aside from this, they also seem to borrow a particular strategy from fandoms. Okay, but that's different from the strategy that was used by the Lenny Kiko camp. So sa BBM Sara na supporters, they were deliberately starting Twitter parties. So as what you can see dito sa slide, may posters sila na ginagawa parang before the event itself. So they're starting Twitter parties in which a single hashtag and a tagline are created and used by supporters starting from a specified time. So may specified time siya lagi during the event day. So kunwari dito sa poster na to, they are encouraged, supporters are encouraged to use the tagline Sara All BBM and the hashtag Bulacan for BBM Sara on March 8 from 1 p.m. onwards. I think one particular reason why the BBM Sara camp is using Twitter parties as a strategy is because of their smaller number. Okay. Yung Twitter parties kasi, they're very effective in boosting a hashtag for a short amount of time. Kasi you are consolidating all of the posts ng mga supporters mo sa isang specified period lang. So from 1 p.m. onwards, ganyan. Unlike dun sa kabila wherein, any supporter can use the hashtag early on as long as it's related to the campaign sortie. Okay. So in their case, a central account coordinates and prepares the publicity materials like the poster that is shown in the slide, and then it is shared by everyone for proper coordination. So very similar to sa mga pop group fandoms or idol fandoms. Okay, and then to note, yung account na naka-mention dito sa poster, actually yung UTL for BBM, suspended na siya as of today or as of yesterday when I was preparing the slides. Okay. So while it has been an effective strategy for fandoms on Twitter, it doesn't seem to be the case for BBM. That's our observation, BBM Sara campaign, as none of their Twitter party hashtags were used in at least 1,000 posts. However, it is still possible that the hashtags trended on the day of the event. Okay, but many of those posts became deleted or withheld over time. That could be one possible reason, but we have to confirm that. All right. So now we can go into discussing yung competing hashtags. So yung first competing hashtag natin is yung kay Lenny Tayo versus kay Lenny Talo and kay Lenny Patay Tayo. So the network here shows the different hashtags that were used with those three competing hashtags. So sa network, pinaka-pink yung kay Lenny Tayo, and then the faint pinks are the other Lenny Kiko related hashtags. And then the darker reds are the BBM Sara hashtags kay Lenny Talo and kay Lenny Patay Tayo. So as you can see, at least visually, mas maraming mixing and interaction yung kay Lenny Tayo na hashtag with other Lenny Kiko hashtags. Whereas yung kay Lenny Patay Tayo and Lenny Talo, konti lang yung mixing nila or konti lang yung engagement nila with the Lenny Kiko hashtags. Okay, so just to explain what these three hashtags are for. So yung kay Lenny Tayo hashtag was used since the start of the campaign, partly because of the song written by volunteers and been performed in many campaign sorties. So posts using this often express their affirmation of support for the tandem. Meanwhile, the kay Lenny Talo hashtag was created to counter this trend in which BBM Sara supporters express reasons why the Vice President and her ticket would lose the elections. And at the same time, yung kay Lenny Patay Tayo hashtag is being used on posts that speculate the infiltration of the CPP-NPA in Lenny Kiko people's rallies. Okay, so however, this assertion has already been denied by the Vice President and independently fact-checked by fact-checkers. Okay. So comparing the three, okay, mas maraming engagement yung kay Lenny Tayo hashtag. Okay, along with its many variations, yung kay Lenny Tayo and kay Lenny na Tayo. So there are around 23% of the tweets that were part of the study. And then yung kay Lenny Talo at kay Lenny Patay Tayo are only used for 1.36% and 0.7% of the tweets that were used. Okay, and they had very few mixing with the Lenny Kiko related hashtags. Which could mean a weak intent to spread their speculations. So alam naman natin whenever these hashtags are started, ang intent is to break the echo chamber of the other camp and then spread the speculations there. But at least from the evidence that we have here, it doesn't seem to be the case. Okay, parang nagstay na lang siya within their own echo chambers. Ayun. And then, as a response to the kay Lenny Talo, kasi at the beginning, the Lenny Kiko supporters were trying to hijack the kay Lenny Talo hashtag. So they were trying to hijack the narrative, make it more Lenny Kiko positive, okay, as opposed to what they were already spreading or what they were already establishing for that hashtag. Okay, but then one caveat of hijacking is that it also boosts yung hashtag na yon. So imbes na mawala siya dun sa trend list, mawala siya dun sa parang awareness ng mga tao, mas nabuboost pa siya and mas nagiging curious yung mga tao bakit kay Lenny Talo yung nagte-trend, parang ganun. So yung pag-hijack na yun is very similar to what K-pop fandoms are doing in other online protests in other countries. No, parang yung impeach Biden now and then yung White Lives Matter na hashtags. As a change of tactic, they used the kay Lenny Talo si Marcos hashtag to stop boosting the original kay Lenny Talo hashtag and bring back the focus to the shortcomings of the BBM Sara tandem. So parang yun yung naging overarching na narrative sa hashtag na yon. And it was also used in posts highlighting VP Lenny Robredo's winning record against Bongbong Marcos in the previous elections that were held between them. Okay, which fuels the hope for another positive election outcome. Okay, so the Lenny Kiko camp was able to encounter yung kay Lenny Talo na hashtag. Okay. Ayun. And then the last countering pair of hashtags is the Let Lenny Lead and Let Lenny Leave. Okay, so the Let Lenny Lead has been one of the most used hashtags in the Lenny Kiko camp ever since she filed her candidacy. So it comes to no surprise that it's still being used up to this day and being mixed with other Lenny Kiko hashtags. BBM Sara supporters try to counter this with the Let Lenny Leave hashtag used in posts about the shortcomings of the Vice President. However, this seems to be confined within their circles. As you can see from the network, yung malaking congregation dyan ng mga hashtags, lahat yan connected dun sa Let Lenny Lead. And then yung Let Lenny Leave, tsaka yung variation niya na all caps, connected lang siya dun sa Bring Back Marcos. Wala na siyang ibang interaction with the other nodes in the network. So parang na-isolate na yung paggamit ng hashtag na yon doon lang sa mga BBM Sara supporters. Okay. So the let Lenny leave were used in only 0.5% of the tweets in the study, which pales in comparison to the let Lenny lead hashtag, which comprises 14.58% of the tweets. Okay. So in conclusion, so we ask ourselves, were they effective? Were the two camps effective in countering each other? Okay, when it comes to the use of these hashtags and coming up with or dominating a certain narrative over the digital platform. So in some sense, yes. Okay, so the BBM Sara supporters, because they know that the Lenny Kiko camp is very dominant on Twitter, they're trying their best to actually like dominate as well the conversation on the digital platform. So, however, their success is only short-lived because we know that compared to comparing the supporters from both camps, mas hyper-engaged yung mga Lenny Kiko supporters sa online platform na ito kumpara sa mga BBM Sara supporters. Some of them are parang naturally sa Facebook talaga gumagamit. And then some of them are just using Twitter to actually contribute to the Twitter party, for example, or in hyping up an event. Okay? So hindi sila ganun ka-invested sa platform unlike yung Lenny Kiko na supporters. Another reason why their success is short-lived is mabilis din mag-counter-attack yung Lenny Kiko supporters. An example of that is the kay Lenny Talo and then kay Lenny Tayo countering hashtags, yung pair na yon. So they were able to hijack the narrative and then eventually they came up with a totally different hashtag to continue, okay, and paint a more positive light doon sa tinatry gawin ng mga BBM Sara supporters. Okay. And then yung Lenny Kiko camp din kasi they were able to own the narrative. Parang for many of the attacks that were thrown at them, especially on the digital platform Twitter, they were able to own the narrative for most of the attacks. Okay. So that's also quite evident kung gaano ka-prevalent yung mga hashtags na ginagamit ng both camps. And that actually concludes my presentation for today. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Professor Brian, for that presentation. And once again, feel free to send in your questions in our Q&A box. But we'll start with our own questions, Professor Brian. So, alam mo yan, you've talked about how they try to hijack each other's hashtags, and then the other camp will try to reclaim it. Ano to? What's the strategic importance for a campaign to be able to sort of reclaim this hashtag that's been hijacked from them? Yung example mo, yung kay Lenny tayo, naging kay Lenny Talo, and then nabawi nila, naging kay Lenny Talo si Marcos. I guess among other things, there's this creative satisfaction in being able to reclaim hashtags in that manner.
Right.
Diba? And turn around and deflect an opponent's attacks.
Right. I guess yung isang importance niya is yun nga, kasi pag na-hashtag mo siya, pag na-hijack mo siya, yung isang hashtag, mas madodominate mo yung conversation dun sa hashtag na yon. So for example, once the kay Lenny Talo hashtag has been hijacked successfully, whenever new BBM Sara supporters would join or the platform, so syempre, una nilang i-explore yung mga hashtags related to their campaign. No? So they would look at kay Lenny Talo, and then kung na-hijack na siya, syempre, yung mga post na makikita nila and the engagement dun sa mga post na yun. Yun yung una nilang makikita, basically. So, it kind of defeats the purpose of having the hashtag in the first place. Kasi, di ba usually, yung hashtag ginagamit natin siya to consolidate parang similar post together. Para later on, when you want to view it, kunyari yung kay Lenny Talo. So, what are the reasons why VP would lose? So, parang ano siya parang archive siya or consolidation siya ng reasons na yun dapat. Pero dahil na-hijack mo nga siya, 'di ba? So, baka mas naging positive pa dun sa kalaban imbes na ano. So, yun yung isang I guess importance kung bakit maganda rin yung mga hijack ng ng hashtag. Ayun. Pero I think Twitter is also may negative side din siya kasi spamming din yun eh. Spamming din yun. So sa rules ng Twitter, it's not allowed. Parang ganon. So, pero I think in our case sa elections natin, it's quite different from the hijacking that's being done elsewhere. Yung mga K-pop groups kasi they just spam it with yung mga mga fan cams, ganyan, mga random stuff just to drown out the noise, parang ganon. Sa atin naman talaga, meron talagang specific na narrative na tinatry gawing mas dominant para pagbalikan ulit ng mga supporters on the other camp, iba yung ma-encounter nila na information. So yeah.
So really part of it is parang drowning. Parang ikaw dapat yung mas lumabas na mas madaming boses, mas maingay. Kasi if not, that hijack hashtag will overpower the original hashtag,
right,
which has an original purpose of promoting
right,
the candidate, right?
Mm-mm.
So I'm curious, did you see any instances of, because we've seen lots of instances of Marcos supporters hijacking the Lenny hashtags. Did you see it the other way around? Were Lenny supporters also?
Meron din. Meron din. Pero for there's event specific hashtags, yung pinapakita yung mga counts, yung mga ganon, yung crowd count, yung mga crowd estimates, and then yung so minsan nagpo-post din yung mga Lenny Kiko supporters gamit yung hashtag ng kabila, minsan to highlight yung aftermath ng event nila, yung mga ganon. So parang nagbabalikan lang sila. So gagawin ng kabilang camp, and then sa next event nila gagawin din ng kabilang camp. I-hijack din nila. Yun yung mga mas prominent na examples ng hijacking. But I think yung isang magandang importance din ng hijacking na practice is especially pag yung hashtag ginagamit na siya to spread disinformation. So yung mga speculations. Parang yung sinabi natin kanina about yung sa kay Lenny patay tayo na hashtag, which was supposed to counter yung kay Lenny tayo. Ginamit talaga siya to actually spread yung speculation na maraming pumupunta sa rallies na mga galing ng CPP-NPA, tapos na-infiltrate na yung mga campaign sorties, tapos mga ganyan.
Okay.
Ayun, and then so syempre sinusubukan yung labanan ng kabilang camp na aside from yung fact checking na nangyayari din. So yun, I think mas beneficial din siya pag ganun yung nangyayari.
Okay. So we have a question from the audience. Has there been a study on possible deliberate misspelling of Lenny hashtags in order to maybe divide their supporter tweets and stop the original hashtag from trending? May naging ganong technique ba?
Right. Hindi ko sure kung deliberate. Yung mga deliberate is yung kunyari yung kay Lenny Talo, kay Lenny tayo tsaka kay Lenny Talo. So deliberate talaga, pinalitan lang yung isang letter from Y to L para mas maging negative siya. I think deliberate siya in a sense na they wanted the Lenny Kiko supporters to accidentally click it. Kasi kay Lenny, sanay na sila makita yung kay Lenny tayo. Tapos syempre, pag sa trend list, pag nakita nila kay Lenny ta, diba? Hindi nila minsan kinukumpleto yung pagbabasa, so click na lang. So tapos magugulat sila, ibang narrative na makita. So I guess that's one possible reason. So mapupunta sila sa kabilang side pala, and then magugulat na lang sila. But parang negative to. So pero ano pa lang yan, anecdotal pa lang yan. So it's just a speculation. So assumption pala. So we might need to investigate it further. Pero that's one possible reason. Yung iba naman na parang misspelling lang talaga, since organic din kasi karamihan ng mga hashtags na nanggagaling dun sa kabilang camp, it's very prone to parang variations. So kung kunwari may iba all caps, yung Let Lenny Lead, may all caps, may camel case, may iba naman nadadagdagan ng isang word. Kunyari kay Lenny tayo, tapos naging kay Lenny na tayo. Or minsan nagkukulang lang talaga ng letters for some reason, and then other supporters would just copy. Minsan kasi pag gusto nilang maka-contribute, kinakopy na lang nila yung hashtag ng ibang mga supporters and then on their own post. So ganun siya nagsispread, I guess. So
Okay. So yung one of your findings is that mostly the pro-Marcos hashtags, they do not mix with the Lenny hashtags, as opposed to the Lenny hashtags trying to mix in the pro-Marcos hashtags para to penetrate the other camp's echo chamber, right? So the Marcos supporters, do they just want to kind of protect their own echo chambers and not necessarily convert more from the opposing camp? Would you say that was the case?
I think they try. May mga ilan sa kanila kasi may mga nakikita rin kami na nagpo-post talaga tapos ginagamit talaga explicitly yung hashtags ng kabila more than yung hashtag nila. So, kunyari, more than yung hashtag ng BBM Sara, mas ginagamit nila yung mga Lenny Kiko to possibly sow division dun sa camp nila or spread more speculations, ganyan, or misinformation. Or minsan din kasi they just want to ridicule the other camp, yung supporters ng other camp. Kaya yung kanina yung panlaban sa kakamping, yung kakam yon. Madalas yun ginagamit na nila as a word din or as a hashtag. Pag gusto nilang mag-penetrate dun sa echo chamber. And then lumalabas din sila actually sa mga top tweets. Paminsan-minsan, lalo na yung mga medyo sikat na mga accounts on their side. So yun.
All right, we have a second question. It's from Professor Jerry. So, are we saying that as Pinoys have become so creative that hashtags have been utilized to a level out of proportion if compared to its original meaning?
I think so. I think nag-start tayo maging creative sa ganyan nung sinimula natin gamitin yung Twitter for disaster response. I think nagsimula yan doon and then eventually yung mga Twitter natives na mas naging flexible na sila. They were able to define different ways how they would use hashtags. I mean, even fandoms who are operating largely on Twitter, marami na silang innovations as to how to use hashtags, mga taglines. May taglines pa sila, iba pa yun sa hashtag. Kasi minsan nasa spam yung hashtag, pero yung taglines hindi masyado. So, nakakahanap sila ng workaround para lumabas pa rin sa trend list pag na-report yung mga hashtag nila ganun. Kasi syempre, pag may kalaban ka, pwede silang mag-report Report mo as spam, ganun. So, mawawala sa trend list.
That's true.
So yes, mas nagiging
mga tools
creative.
din talaga na maano. So, kailangan creative ka to kind of circumvent those
pawitihan talaga.
policies. Yeah.
Pawiti.
Actually, matutuwa ka nga how they counter.
Come up with new hashtags.
Yeah, with new hashtags na they just add a new word and then it becomes parang ibang bagay na siya.
Right.
So,
yeah,
but one thing that's on Twitter is that it's established that it's dominated by Robredo supporters, right? And your study kind of proves that again.
Study.
But would you have insights? I mean, what are the reasons you've seen for this? What makes Twitter different from Facebook or Twitter, where pro-Marcos content and networks appear to have taken hold much more than on Twitter?
I guess I'm just speculating.
Okay.
Maybe one reason is si Twitter kasi wala siyang free version. So sa Facebook kasi mas maraming tao doon, tapos may free version pa ng Facebook. So it is possible that there are many more people using Facebook. And then yung mas privileged siguro, they're able to use Twitter. And I guess kaya ganun din yung demographic ng mga taong gumagamit ng Twitter. Although we're not saying na other demographics don't have Twitter accounts. They do, but they're not using it as often as yung ibang mga Twitter natives na talaga. So, ayun. Kaya I think yung BBM Sara camp, mas active sila sa Facebook, I think. Sa mga groups, sa mga ganyan. And they're slowly trying to make inroads sa Twitter. I mean, makikita naman natin how coordinated they are. And they are having some successes. To be fair to them, they are having some successes. And it helps to their cause. Pero I guess magaling lang din talaga mang-drown out yung kabilang kampo. Kaya minsan nasasapawan din sila.
So ngayon,
pero kudos to them.
Effective pa yung ginagawa ng mga Robredo supporters sa Twitter to maybe kind of drown out the presidential rival camp.
Right. Kasi I think familiar na rin yung mga nasa Twitter sa iba't ibang strategies on how to make certain things trend over Twitter. So they know when to handle it or how to handle it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. All right, so that's all the time we have for our question and answer, and our unless we have pahabol, if there people will still ask. All right, so going once,
Meron yata sa
going twice.
Q&A.
All right,
Oh,
ayan. So in the tweets with the hashtags like hashtag Kilenitalo, I think it would be interesting to check the usernames of the posters and see if there's a presence of trolls. What are your thoughts on this? So,
yes, I think for sure may mga trolls on
is
both
there,
sides. May trolls on both sides.
Mm.
But then I guess yung trolls, at least dun sa Lenny Kiko camp, mas na-overpower lang. Hindi lang sila masyadong nahalata siguro kung meron man. Kasi marami ding organic na movement na nangyayari on their side. Whereas doon sa BBM Sara camp, because they're not originally active on Twitter, they had to rely more on more coordinated contents posts para talaga makapagpa-trend sila. So for sure there are some presence of trolls, although that's still parang an unsolved problem, like what really is a troll. Kasi minsan may mga ordinaryong tao na nagpo-post na troll-like pero hindi naman talaga sila troll. Alam mo yun? Troll-like lang kasi they kind of mimic. So yun. Yeah, pero it would be interesting to check. Pero I guess hindi lang siya sa username makikita. Kasi I think aware na sila eh. Aware na sila na pag yung puro numbers yung dulo ng username mo, iisipin na agad na troll ka. So they will try to change it. So pag medyo batikan na yung troll, alam na nila kung paano magmukhang mas normal na tao sa Twitter.
Yes, and the one thing that can also be checked yung creation date of the account.
Right.
But then after some time, these newly created accounts will mature din,
Right.
di ba? Parang pag tinignan mo, matagal na pala din tong account.
Yeah.
Alright.
Minsan I think 'di ba meron din kayong study yata na yung iba naman binibili, old accounts na binibili, tapos mas ginagamit na siya for for coordinator. Yeah.
Strategy.
So may iba strategy kasi nga alam na nga nila na pag bagong gawa, most likely tapos sobrang active, most likely troll siya. So alam na nila how to circumvent that. Hanap ng old accounts.
Pwedeng gagawa na ng mga accounts ngayon and then after some time pa yung activation,
Yes.
di ba? To kind of circumvent that newly created account policy as a troll characteristic.
Right.
Okay. So, final statements, Prof, before we end.
I guess for me is my final statement is while this may sound like a win for the dominant kakampings on Twitter, at least for the study that I conducted, I guess they already know by now that elections are not won online. So we have to use all of the energy that we are getting from these platforms and then translate it to on-ground movements. Kasi I guess we have yet to see, at least in the Philippine context, okay, how large campaigns and movements like these in Twitter and Facebook and other digital platforms translate to bigger and better outcomes in the real world. So marami na kasi, pero parang wala pa tayong nakikitang direct parang correlation or causation dun sa mga outcomes na nakikita natin on the ground. So hopefully for some of the camps, this will be it. Ayun.
Okay. Thank you very much, Professor Brian, and also Professor Jerry, for your time today and for sharing your knowledge with us. All right. So
thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. For more details on Facts First, please check out factsfirst.ph, and we have tip lines for submissions of posts containing dubious claims on Viber or Messenger. The fact-checking layer of this initiative will verify these claims and publish reports debunking lies or misleading information. For groups interested, they may reach out to hashtag FactsFirst by sending an email to info@factsfirst.ph. So see you this Friday for our last Facts First PH research briefing. Thank you and good afternoon.
Thank you.
See you, Jello. See you, Brian.